Super quick question here. How many tabs do you have open right now? If you're like me, it's a lot. And if you're running a business, it's a lot more. And with all those tabs, you're spending more time searching through data and less time, growing your business. But HubSpot's customer platform brings all your tools into a single powerful place that your teams can use together. So close those tabs. It's business growing time. Visit HubSpot.com to get started today. Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 11th. I'm John Weigell here with Mark Dent, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Apple's Glow Time event on Monday announced iPhone 16 among other flashy upgrades across the suite, but surprisingly, that didn't really help their stock, which has been down since. Despite the downturn and its big European tax fine, we'll get to that in a minute, analysts are saying iPhone 16 will be the most successful iPhone launch in company history. So let's break down why exactly they think that. We'll chat about that in a bit, but first, let's give you the hits and headlines today in business and tech. To kick us off today, Bank of America is set to raise its hourly minimum wage to $24 in October for thousands of employees. The wage hike is going to come amid a growing shortage. Banks will need to hire 27,000 tellers a year for the next 10 years, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. I really did not think about this, Mark.
It's such a necessary job.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they are raising this wage, and they should just raise it higher. I mean, I guess I don't go to the banks all that often, but this seems like, if you're Bank of America or any bank, you need tellers very much.
You do. I don't know about your experience, but every time I go to one of my banks, there's only 2 tellers there out of maybe 10 slots. So yeah, they definitely need more of them.
Yeah, more tellers.
Yeah. Next, SpaceX's Polaris Dawn mission launched yesterday morning from NASA's Kennedy Space Center with 4 astronauts aboard who plan to complete the world's first commercial spacewalk. From there, we go to Target. Target has partnered with 6, quote, fur-fluencers, new term for me too, don't worry, to promote its pet products after finding 70% of Target shoppers own a pet. Makes a lot of sense considering their mascot is a dog. And in kind of more Target news, Amazon is coming for companies like Target and Aldi with its own line of no-frills grocery items. Branded as Amazon Savor, these items are mostly under $5 and include things like turkey breast, maple syrup, canned peas, and your just normal fare, I guess, like graham crackers. What do you make of this move, Mark? It seems like they're really trying to infringe on these other companies, and they're kind of out of the Whole Foods bubble right now.
This is what Amazon does.
Yeah.
Their whole business has been to disrupt and infringe and make everyone else very uncomfortable for those companies. And it's led to really good returns for Amazon. And when Amazon bought Whole Foods, which I think was in 2017, it's been, I think, surprising how little progress they've actually made in groceries. Mm-hmm. They haven't dominated that industry. And I'm not sure that this is a sign that they're going to start dominating it. But I do think that it's an indication that Amazon is taking groceries even more seriously and also going about it the right way instead of with more premium type of products, especially right now with people still being angry about inflation.
Exactly. They've gotten into the Amazon basics in the last few years, and that's for very easy household items like disinfectant wipes, paper towels. They've really run the gamut. This seemed like a logical next step for them, especially since companies like Target and Walmart are kind of leaning more on discount items to lure back shoppers. So I think they're probably going to take a good chunk out of the market, but remains to be seen whether they'll assert their dominance once again in another space. And finally, Australia intends to implement a minimum age for social media users, likely between 14 and 16. Those against the plan are concerned, though, that it could push online activity underground. If you tell somebody they can't do something, they'll probably find a way to do it, and worse. So I kind of get it. Okay, on to the main story today. Apple's big new iPhone announcement shook up the tech industry as per usual every year. It just didn't do them any favors on Wall Street, really. So, Mark, Apple's stock is a bit down, but it seems like analysts are still saying that this iPhone 16 launch is going to be a game changer. Why do you think that is?
Well, some analysts are just extremely bullish about this latest iPhone. And the main reason behind that is actually just simple math. Wedbush Securities came out with this investment note They kind of just threw out there that there's around 300 million iPhones that have not been upgraded in like the last 4 years. So they're just saying those are going to need to be upgraded.
They're going to get you.
Yeah. And so it's not so much like the wonder of this new iPhone, although I do think there are some good features on this new iPhone. But yeah, like they literally predict that 240 million iPhones will have to be upgraded potentially by the end of next year.
Wow.
So that would mean potentially 240 million new iPhone 16s that would be sold, or maybe some other models. But either way, that's a striking number. I was trying to find out if, like, by comparison, there'd been any of the other recent iPhones that have sold nearly that much. Mm-hmm. And the number's actually kind of hard to find, but the iPhone 4, which came out around 2010 when everyone was starting to get a smartphone.
Right.
So that iPhone 4, it sold around 4 million units just in its first 3 days, and, ended up selling around 50 million plus. And that was an extremely popular iPhone.
Yeah.
So if this is true that so many people are looking for upgrades, then yeah, I mean, this could easily be one of the highest selling iPhones of all time.
Given that part about so many people just needed to upgrade, which makes a lot of sense, I don't know if that's due to the need for a new flashy piece of technology, or that's just due to nobody's needed one in 4 to 5 years because all of the iterations have been very similar from one another since
the iPhone 4.
Yeah, we could even go back that far. It's just been very, very similar year after year. Of course, they add something new. Like this year, they added a little button up top for the Pro, on side for the regular iPhone 16 that has some camera controls. So there's some things happening, right? But yet again, it seems like another similar device. But the big thing that they've been touting is the Apple Intelligence, the AI kind of associated with it. And that seems to be the other big part of why this new phone is thought to be some big revolutionary piece of technology.
Exactly. And I think that in addition to, just the simple math that we just discussed, why this iPhone could maybe kind of break the trend of all the recent iPhones being at least somewhat disappointing is that it won't have so many new features, but it will have new technology coming forward that can be used on it. Mm-hmm. The Apple Intelligence, like you were talking about. For as much as people talk about AI, it's really not very popular. I was looking at a story we did at The Hustle just from earlier this year, and only about 4% of young Americans use AI daily, and only 23% have ever used ChatGPT at any point.
Wow.
So, I mean, we're talking about like by far the most ubiquitous AI product, and not even a quarter of people have used it even once. And what Apple is really good at is getting people to try new things because they just put them on the one item that everyone owns and is addicted to.
Right. And make it easy, right?
Exactly. And so I think that some of these new features, you were talking about the camera control, which ostensibly just makes it a little bit easier, or at least a little more fun to take videos. But it also includes this thing called like visual intelligence, which is going to roll out, I think, when iOS 18 kind of hits the scene. And that is something where like someone who's using the camera can, be pressing that button and they can like point it at an object maybe that they're not familiar with, or they just want to know more about. And then the AI will tell them about it. And so that's a very functional piece of AI that might actually be somewhat useful.
Yeah.
And so people will see those kinds of features and perhaps want to buy the new iPhone instead of maybe getting like a cheaper, older model.
Yeah, and it kind of reads very similar to a lot of the wearable AI devices that have come out in the past year, like the Humane Pin, Rabbit R1 was another device that similar functionality of like, show me this thing, what is this flower? Tell me about this flower or something like that. So glad to see that they're integrating that into technology that we already use every day instead of inventing, a new piece of technology.
Yeah, and that Apple doesn't screw it up usually, right? They rarely screw things up.
Yeah, usually they're pretty on the money with these kind of things. Yeah, making seemingly very complicated things seem very easy to the user. So that's kind of an exciting thing. But I mean, there is kind of a whole nother problem here about Apple and their phones, because their phones really haven't been selling that well in China. And there are a couple of Chinese companies that are kind of breathing down their neck over there. So I think whether this phone is going to sell well in China might be quite a big piece of the pie for their stocks going forward.
For sure. The iPhone has, of course, dominated in the US. It was slower to kind of gain domination worldwide, although it has started to cut into the lead of Android in a lot of countries. Like you said, China, they still have a lot of work kind of cut out for them. And again, I think it just comes down to AI. Like, how much are people going to actually want to use AI, and how good are the Apple Intelligence features as well as whatever apps people kind of come out with that use AI and can then be used on an iPhone, and how much harder is it to use that kind of stuff on some of the competitors' phones.
Yeah. And it seems that this kind of just stacks on some other international issues that Apple's been having recently. Of course, this week it also came out that Apple has to pay Ireland over $14 billion for a tax bill. So, I mean, these things have kind of been coming up left and right. And obviously the EU has been regulating big tech a little more. Yeah, it's interesting to see how things are heating up internationally, but it's very much still dominant over in the US.
And this EU court case, I think, is a pretty big deal, though, because this involved Apple and it also involved Google. But this was actually a case that literally dates back to 2016. And, we talk on this show, every time we bring up anything legal with some ruling or some court case, we always talk about, well, there's going to be an appeal and it could take years. Well, this is the years. Like it took 8 years, yeah. But this ended poorly for Apple. They're going to owe about $14 billion over. It was just kind of like this sweetheart deal in Ireland where they more or less were able to avoid some taxes. And then the EU said, well, you can't do that. This is like kind of essentially abuse by big tech. And things are really happening finally in the kind of whole antitrust world here in the US and in Europe. The EU has been a little bit stricter than the US, generally speaking, but obviously that's changed a little bit in the last couple of years here in the US. And I don't know. The thing with antitrust cases is that, yes, they do take a long time. $14 billion is a lot of money, but it's, not necessarily a ton to Apple. Mm-hmm. But what does hurt them is when these decisions keep on coming, it means they have to start reevaluating, who they are and what they're doing to try to avoid them, because you don't want to deal with them. And so I think that it's possible that all of these little sort of dings are going to have like a big effect on Apple and probably Google too.
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later.
Yeah, right. And it couldn't have come at a better time with their release season here and things coming out at the end of this month, new headphones, new iPhone. So it's definitely a fascinating time to work at Apple, I'm sure. All right, and that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning in to the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor today is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a ton more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. If you're not subscribed, go sign up at thehustle.co/email and give us a follow on Instagram. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. With access to so much information, it's hard to feel like an informed, discerning citizen. That's why Make Me Smart, a podcast from Marketplace, makes it easy for you to stay in the know. Each weekday, hosts Kai Risdahl and Kimberly Adams unpack the latest from DC, explore the day's tech news, and they make sense of the economy. Because in a world that's constantly changing, we all need to stay smart. Listen to Make Me Smart wherever you get your podcasts.